guys, welcome back. And today I want to talk about Brad Marchand and why we need to stop falling for his trap. Now the famous rat Brad Marchand is up to no good once again, so what did he do this time and how are people still falling for his trap? Watch till the end to find out. Now, Brad Marchand has had an interesting playoff so far. Just as we thought he was maybe cleaning up his act in the regular season, these playoffs have proved he's definitely returning to his old dirty ways. But that's exactly what Brad Marchand wants you to think. Now, in Game 2 of the Boston Bruins vs. Carolina Hurricanes game, Brad Marchand and Justin Williams got in a bit of a tangle. Brad Marchand first kind of hooking on Justin Williams' shoulder. Justin Williams rightfully went back at him and got pretty mad, and ended up kind of grabbing his beard and grabbing his helmet, going to the box for a penalty, and that whole play was what started this all. And just after the play ended, as Justin Williams went to the box and Brad Marchand was skating off the ice with the referee, Brad Marchand ended up putting a C signal up to his jersey, kind of mocking both Justin Williams and the Carolina Hurricanes. And that is very typical Brad Marchand, mocking in any way possible. But it was very, very sneaky, very, very snarky, and honestly was pretty funny. Now, after the game, in his post-game interview, Justin Williams ended up saying that both he and the Carolina Hurricanes ended up eating a poop sandwich, and he was trying to take it more to a PG route, which I understand. Of course, the guy has kids, so it does make sense. But when it comes to that whole situation, I would assume he was pointing at the Brad Marchand incident as the main thing there, and it does make sense. With that whole play, of course, Brad Marchand did aggravate Justin Williams. It should have been a penalty, but there was no penalty on Brad Marchand. And then after that one, because of that, Justin Williams ended up going to him and making that holding penalty or whatever it was, and he did that perfectly. Brad Marchand played that whole thing perfectly, pretty much just played it like a fiddle, and Justin Williams bit on that play. He totally committed, and Brad Marchand played it perfectly, and obviously it worked for the Boston Bruins. And Justin Williams, practically with that quote, pretty much admitted that he fell for Brad Marchand's trap. He pretty much knew in the moment there, just afterwards, what he had done. And I'm pretty sure with that penalty, I'm pretty sure Boston ended up scoring. So it was biting Carolina in the back as well. And that's something that Brad Marchand has done for Boston too many times to count. In these playoffs as well, he's worked that beautifully. The line that he hasn't crossed too many times so far of just making some dirty plays, but getting under the skin of the opponent. And he certainly did with Justin Williams. Now, Brad Marchand is an excellent hockey player. That's a little bit of an understatement. This season with the Boston Bruins in the regular season, he ended up getting 100 points. In the playoffs so far, he has been tied with second in points with Brad Burns for 15 points in the playoffs. He's been an absolute beast, especially offensively, in the last couple of years. Right now, he's pretty much smack dab in his prime. His prime is a little bit later than a lot of other players in the NHL today, but he's getting it done. The Boston Bruins obviously love to have him on his team. Even with the peskiness, even with all of those things, he's still a very productive hockey player, and we've seen that so far. Now, especially with Brad Marchand, the thing that I think he gets most underappreciated with is his smarts. Now, for me personally, I'd argue that he is the smartest player in the NHL today. Now, is it smart to make dirty plays after dirty plays after dirty plays? Of course it isn't. We've seen Brad Marchand do that time and time again. But the thing that makes him, to me, the smartest player in the NHL is how many times he seems to get away with it. While he has been suspended a few times in the past, quite a bit more than any NHL player in the past, he gets away with the most stuff in the NHL. But he knows where the gray areas lie. He knows where he can straddle a line of just barely dirty but not dirty enough to get suspended or fined or whatever. He knows exactly what to do to get away with the refs, the NHL players' safety, everything he does, he knows what he's doing. He knows he's going to be an experienced guy in the back of the shoulder. He knew what he was doing with Justin Williams, but he got away with it that time. He's gotten away with it countless other times. Of course, with the Columbus series, he ended up punching Glendening in the head when he was on the ice. He somehow didn't get suspended for that, but he knows what to get away with, and he's done it time and time in the past. And to get away with so much, Brad Marchand, again, more than any other player in the league, that takes skill, that takes talent, and that takes smarts. And to already be putting up 100 points on the season, to be tied for second in points in the playoffs, and to do as much as he's doing from getting away with countless dirty hits and dirty plays, that takes a lot of management in here. It takes a lot of management, of course, physically, and I feel like with Brad Marchand, he has a lot on his plate right now when it comes to the playoffs, but he's doing it every single night, scoring points, getting that done offensively, and aggravating the opponent almost perfectly. And we kind of saw that in the Columbus series, where Brad Marchand was all over the skin of the Columbus Blue Jackets, again, with that punch on Clendening that should have been suspendable, but he got away with it, of course, and he was all over in the Columbus Blue Jackets' heads. And because of that, a guy like David Pastrnak, who's been somewhat invisible up to that point in the playoffs, got an amazing Game 6 performance and led the Boston Bruins into the Eastern Conference Final. And that's what he kind of does most. He scores points, he aggravates opponents, and at that point, even when he isn't scoring, when he's aggravating, he's drawing attention to himself, which allow guys like Bergeron, like Pastrnak, like Krejci to do their thing. And especially with the refs, maybe less or so with the player safety, but with the refs in the NHL, with these playoffs, they've been especially bad compared to years past. But when it comes to the refs, he knows every single blind spot with the refs. Every single thing that they wouldn't call, Brad Marchand knows that and masters that to a T every single game. Whether it comes to hits, cross checks, whatever it might be. Anything that he does dirty, he knows how to get away with it. Sometimes he has crossed the line like we've seen in the past. But with Brad Marchand, he does it every single game. Some little things that would get a player penalized, he never gets called for. But that is the art that Brad Marchand brings to the game every single game for the Boston Bruins. And we've seen how much of an impact he's had for the Boston Bruins throughout these playoffs versus Toronto, versus Columbus, and now versus Carolina. Boston has a 2-0 lead against Carolina, and a lot of that, I think, has to do with Brad Marchand and how he's handled themselves in this series. Again, not getting suspended yet, he hasn't had that problem. While guys like McAvoy have gotten suspended for bad hits, as they should have, Brad Marchand is still in the games, he is still playing, he's magical with the puck offensively, he's doing his job, of course, and he's aggravating the opponents to the point where they draw all the attention to him rather than focus on the main task at hand, which is the rest of the Boston Bruins, who are very, very solid as well. And we've seen teams like Columbus, Toronto, and now Carolina getting burned because of that. But Brad Marchand is one of those few players in the league that you love to have as a teammate, but hate to play against every single time. But Brad Marchand perfectly perfects that as a guy that is a great teammate, a great guy that holds players responsible, but also to the other team, aggravates them perfectly, gets under their skin, and creates chance for the Boston Bruins every single night. And for Brad Marchand, he really completes that package of being an aggravator, being a scorer, and being the best player on the Boston Bruins. And while some people might say that the refs are biased for Brad Marchand, they're biased for the Boston Bruins, I can say that right now with 100% certainty that it is not the case. While it may seem that way, the Boston Bruins get more calls than other teams. Pretty much every single team has gotten screwed and has gotten beneficial from a lot of calls in these playoffs. It's been wacky and all over the place. But a lot of people like to point the finger at the Boston Bruins as a team that gets away with everything. And that is the case because they know how to get away with everything. It's coming from the top. Guys like Brad Marchand knowing how to get away with stuff. While obviously Stanley is the captain there, he obviously still does know how to get away with stuff. We saw that a lot, especially in the series versus Toronto, where there was a lot of questionable plays by Stanley that did not get called. And I don't see that as being biased for the refs. I see that as just plain misunderstanding on the refs' part. Not knowing what to call, and for the Boston Bruins, they know how to get away with it. And of course, Brad Marchand is the king with that. And if you're the Boston Bruins, if you know there's a way to manipulate the reffing, manipulate the NHL, why wouldn't you do that? That's a thing that the Boston Bruins have been taking advantage of for years now. But especially in these playoffs, they've been doing it almost perfectly. While there has been some exceptions, like the McAvoy suspension, they've been doing it very, very greatly right now, and obviously the refs look to be biased when they're really not. But the plain fact is that both Brad Marchand, the Rats, and the Boston Bruins are in the Eastern Conference Final. Right now, they have a 2-0 lead over the Carolina Hurricanes, a great position to be at. And that's plain and simple what is happening with Brad Marchand. It is working for him. He's getting the benefit of the doubt, even though he has gotten away with so much in the past. You can't deny it. And the sooner we recognize Brad Marchand as a manipulator of the NHL and NHL fans, the sooner it will actually stop. And while some people might call Brad Marchand a rat or a pest, those are true. But the sooner we start thinking of Brad Marchand as a manipulator of the NHL, NHL refs, NHL player safety, of the NHL in general, the sooner this madness will stop with him. With Brad Marchand, I want this stuff to stop. The taunting, I think that's fine. But the dirty plays after dirty plays, I think should not be tolerated. And I don't think that should be tolerated in today's NHL. But with Brad Marchand, he's getting away with all of it. At this point, calling a rat is not going to do too much. He embraces that role. He loves being the rat of the NHL, and saying that is not going to change a thing. But I do respect Brad Marchand, not for the dirty plays that he ends up making, but for the persuasiveness and the manipulation that he has on the NHL. That masterfully, putting that perfectly on NHL refs every single game is just an art to behold. And while Brad Marchand has obviously made dirty plays after dirty plays in the past, I respect him for that, at least. With Brad Marchand, his trap for the NHL has been a long time persuasiveness and manipulation. We've seen this in this playoffs where a lot of refs have gotten the benefit of the doubt on him, have given him a lot of favorable calls that he should not have gotten. And we've seen that so many times for the last few playoffs and just his NHL career. And I think it is time to stop the craziness that is Brad Marchand. Now, I'm not telling you guys to like Brad Marchand. If you do, if you don't, it doesn't really matter too much. I'm just telling you guys to stop falling into his trap before it's too late. And if we keep going down this road of calling him Brad, doing really nothing to solve the actual problem, it will be too late in a matter of no time. But of course, with this video, I want to hear your guys' thoughts down in the comments down below. So, let me know, what do you think about Brad Marchand? Do you like him? Do you hate him? What do you think about him? And of course, what do you think about his antics versus Toronto, Columbus, and now Carolina? Do you want him to keep doing what he's doing right now? Or do you want him to actually get stopped? But if you guys want some more Grav videos just like this one, you can click on this card right here to watch my video about Mitch Marner, and you can possibly get traded from the Toronto Maple Leafs. But that'll be it for today, guys. If you guys did enjoy, make sure you like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell if you haven't already. Again, comment down below your thoughts on Brad Marchand and his tactics and pesky ways throughout the playoffs. And I'll see you guys next video or stream. Goodbye.